Yes, welcome everybody. I know some of you saw us as recently as last week, so thank you for joining us again. But this is also such a different topic, and so if this is your first time joining us, I'm Heather Kelly with the Coffee MBA, and Miranda, the beautiful founder, and my screen, she's on my left, and CEO of the Coffee MBA. We are going to have Kevin Wencel here speaking about price changing and margin assessment for your cafe menus. We are so excited to have Kevin as a part of our Coffee MBA collective. And if you haven't heard of the collective yet, it is a vetted group of professionals who are from the specialty coffee industry or have a special skill or experience to deliver to the specialty coffee industry and to businesses of all sizes in the industry. So it's a consulting agency, and Kevin is a part of it. And so Kevin, it has an amazing background from chef and food service, food person, to high level at US Foods, broadliner, in the college and university sector. Kevin was also a president at the president of Spy House Coffee Roasters and a division president, market president for Fairwave Specialty Coffee Collective. So essentially what I'm trying to say is he's kind of a big deal. So we're very lucky to have him. And he's going to drop some knowledge on us today about pricing tools and price changes on your cafe menus. So I am going to turn this over to Kevin, and he's going to wow us with his amazing amazing skills. And just a few housekeeping aspects. Please make sure to drop any comments or questions in the chat box. And also we have a survey at the end. Your feedback really matters to us, so we'd really love for you to fill out that feedback. And we will have a QA session at the end, so please make sure to bank those questions so we have a really robust QA section. Excuse me. All right, Kevin, take it away.
Thank you, Heather. Hi, everybody. I think some of you, I don't know everybody. Again, as Heather said, my name's Kevin. I am excited to be part of the Coffee MBA collectives. Excited to be with you here today, running through some cafe pricing knowledge that I have that I'd love to share. Yeah, it's an exciting time with SCA coming up, and lots of information to share and lots of people to meet. So lovely to meet all of you, and I think we can jump in and get going here. So as Heather said, I'm Kevin. I've been in food and beverage for a long time, for almost over 25 years. First as a chef in the Twin Cities area, as Heather mentioned. Then I did work for US Foods for about a decade locally in the Twin Cities for a little bit, most of the time with US Foods Corporate, with their team that handled the group purchasing organization called Premier. Many of you may be familiar with GPOs. If you work with like Canteen or Compass, you're with Food Buy. Aramark has Integra. There's lots of different GPOs out there. So I handle that business for US Foods in hospitality, lodging, entertainment, and college and university. So that was a lot of fun. And then, as Heather mentioned as well, was president of Spy House Coffee starting in 2019. And we grew our cafes. We grew our CPG presence. We made our way through COVID like everybody did. And then we were acquired by Fairwave Coffee Collective, after which we had Up Coffee Roasters, Folly Coffee, Filterra Coffee join our market, and I did that. Now with the Coffee Collective, do a little consulting with F&B and coffee CPG with a handful of different folks. So, but what we are here to talk about today is cafe menu pricing, and here's what we're actually going to cover. We'll be focusing on cafes, but we, specifically we'll dig into how to maximize bottom line profitability through the cafe, right? How do you price your menu? How do you change prices? And I know we throw around a lot of terms and acronyms. There's a process and a procedure. Every time we do that, there's new terms. And so I'll spend the first part going over, just some what's margin, what's markup, what's contribution, what terms are impactful to this exercise. We'll talk a little bit about COGS. There was a question early on in LinkedIn about, are we talking about COGS? I'll touch on it, but it's going to be a good subject matter for another webinar. Most of it we'll discuss how to effectively and strategically make menu pricing decisions, as opposed to just going with your gut, right? I think this should be priced about here. I think we should raise prices about this much. I want everybody to be able to validate and quantify what your gut's telling you and challenge it too. And we'll have a quick overview and definition of these, key market, key performance indicators, margin, markup, contribution. We'll talk a little bit about each one of those. We'll help evaluate we'll have an example of evaluating some current pricing and looking at each of those metrics, looking at pricing through each of those metrics and what does it really mean? And then how to effectively decide on how you're going to change your menu pricing, but doing it in a very, very informed way. And then this is all going to be done on a tool that I've developed that if you'd like it after the webinar, we'll send it to you. I'm happy to spend a little bit of time with anybody to walk them through about how to use this tool. But I developed this a long time ago when I was working in restaurants to help do exactly the same thing. How do we do effective, informed menu change pricing? And the last but not least, I'll show you how you use that same tool to effectively make sure that your results are on track. Okay, so did it work? And then we'll have some questions and answers. Okay, so starting at the start, let's talk a little bit about KPIs and definitions. There's a lot of terms we can use. There's a lot of terms that you use, I know, when you're evaluating the financial state of your business. We're going to talk about these 5. So just real quick, some of you know this. I know that. For those that don't or might get confused or aren't exactly sure, this is for everybody. Okay, so cost of goods. I know we talk about cost of goods or COGS a lot, but the definition we're using is all the costs and expenses directly related to the production of your goods. Okay, labor's part of COGS, sure, agreed. However, labor is always a factor or a ratio to sales, and for our purposes today, I'm not including labor. We can talk, again, that'll be a great topic for another webinar, but we're not going to talk about labor today. For menu costing and where menu pricing should be, I don't include labor, but it should be included in the overall picture, another topic. Revenue, total dollars brought in from sales before expenses. Pretty straightforward, right? It's money in the bank. It's what you actually earn. Gross profit and margin, that's a formula. And I want to take a minute and say gross profit, margin, and markup, we too often, interchange those terms. Margin is not markup. Markup is not margin. They're 2 different calculations and they're used for different purposes. And we're going to talk about that and show some examples today. But to start with, margin is revenue minus your COGS divided by revenue. You express that usually as a percentage. And this really focuses on the costs. Like taking the costs out of the money you brought in, what do you got left over? That's your margin. Okay. Markup, on the other hand, revenue minus COGS divided by COGS. So this focuses more on pricing. So markup informs margin, and we'll see that in an example in a second. But you use markup to get to a specific margin. So how much are you marking? Are you marking up 100%? Is it 200%? For some coffee drinks, it's 700%, right? So markup and margin are not the same. It's the most important place that this shows up is when you start talking about something like your contracts or your agreements that you have with retailers or maybe distributors if you're in the CPG world and you're a roaster. If you're talking markup, but you really mean margin, you're not going to make the money you thought you were going to make. It's a different metric. We'll see that in a second. And last but not least, contribution. That is just margin expressed as dollars. And I always say, look, I get paid in dollars, not in percentages. Percentages are great. We talk about percentages a lot. But if we get wrapped up in that, we start to lean in a little bit too much of like, that's a great percentage. That's a great margin. My question always is, yeah, but a margin on what? Like, what's the actual money that I'm bringing in? Okay. So those are the definitions that are helpful today. Next, let's dig into margin, markup, and contribution. Like I said, we're going to look at margin versus markup. What's the difference? There's the formulas again. We just touched on that. Let's look at margin with an example. So let's take a $7 coffee drink. Let's say my cost of goods, the ingredients, the cup, the lid, the average use of condiments. Again, we can cover these things in a COGS webinar. But my COGS are $2.73. So $7 minus $2.73 divided by 7 is going to equal 61 cents. Or I'm sorry, 0.61, not 61 cents, 0.61. Multiply that by 100 and you get 61%. So my margin on this drink is 61%. Okay, that makes sense. Markup is different. So same drink, $7 minus 273 divided by 273 equals 1.56. To multiply that times 100, that's 156%. That's how much I had to mark it up in order to get my margin of 61%. See, they're not the same. We use them frequently interchangeably, but that's a mistake. I'm trying to correct that. Margin is not markup and vice versa. So 156% markup on this product is going to give you 61% margin. Okay. And then this is actually a helpful chart to really put this directly into real numbers. So these are conversion charts. I think I stole this from Motley Fool or somebody, but the idea is that when you have a markup of like 80%, your margin on that product is only going to be 44%, right? Conversely, if you have a margin, gross profit is margin, right? Is 40%, it's a 66% markup. So this is really just to highlight again, to beat a dead horse, they're not the same thing. So make sure that you understand when you're talking with somebody or when you're talking with your team, or when you're evaluating it for yourself, you're looking at the right thing. You're looking at the correct number, and you're talking about margin, you're talking about margin. If you're talking about markup, talk about markup. Personally, I always use markup more as an internal conversation. Like, I got a new drink. It's going to be one of our specialty drinks. What's the average markup on our specialty drinks? And if I do that for this drink, is it going to give me the same margin? It's a good starting point. Most of the conversations, that's why we title this, What's Your Margin? Most of the conversations you're going to be having on finance, whether that's with outside parties or profitability of your own business is going to be margin. Okay. All right, contribution, last but not least, we've been talking percentages. Let's take that same example, right? $7 drink, $2.73 COGS. That leaves me $4.27. That's the 61%. But again, it's really important that we talk about the dollars because that's what matters is the dollars. And to drive that point home, let's take a quick example here. Okay, tie this together. I've got 3 products. I've got number 1, number 2, and number 3. I don't know what they are. But the number 1 has a 60% margin. Number 2 has a 41% margin. Number 3 has a 26% margin. That doesn't tell me anything, right? Because I don't know percentage of what. 60% looks pretty good, but I don't know. Let's dig in a little bit deeper and see what we're actually talking about. The markup to get to those. Actually, I'm using an old deck. Okay, this should say not 67%. This should say 150%. Okay, so my example is not going to strike home exactly the same, but this is 150, this is 68, this is 35%. Okay, I've got a little bit more information. I had to mark this up a lot, a little bit less. I'm still not totally impressed with number 3, but that's my gut saying I'm not impressed with it because I don't know what the actual bottom line is here on what I'm taking home. All right, dig in again. All right, the sell price. Okay, this gives some clarity. $1.25. $6 and 20. Maybe it's a sticker. We all sell stickers, right? $6 is a cappuccino and $25 is maybe a t-shirt. Okay. So what are we going to see now is that my COGS on each one of those 50 cents, 357 and 1846 give even more depth of information, right? So now I understand, okay, low margin, high contribution, that can be a thing. Depends upon what your sell price is, depends upon what your COGS is. Okay. COGS are. Tie it all together. Again, this number should be 150, not 67. Sorry. But the contribution is 75 cents, $2.43, and 654. This is where it really hits home for me. Look, 75 cents looks like my margin's great on that, but it's 3/4, right? I'm going to need to sell about 9 of those to equal 1 t-shirt over there. Contribution for number 2, same sort of thing. I need to sell 3 or so of those to make up for 3 cappuccinos to make the same money I'd make on 1 t-shirt. Look, this doesn't answer a whole lot of questions, but it helps give perspective to like, okay, what number am I looking at and what does that actually mean? Dollars matter, so make sure that you know what your contribution is on your products. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Stop me if I talk fast, but I want to make sure I get a lot of information in here. Okay. There was a question about COGS early on. I won't go detailed into this, but I wanted to give you a little sneak peek. Since we're talking about pricing and profitability, COGS is certainly a part of that. It's a great subject for another another webinar, but right now I would want to give you 4 tips about controlling COGS that I find helpful, and start thinking about how you control your COGS a little bit more detailed, and who helps you control your COGS. It's not always just about, I need the lowest price for the things that I'm buying. It is that. That's not everything. So number 1, keep tabs of your key high volume and high dollar items. Track them at least monthly, weekly for some. So you're going to have some products that you buy a lot of, and some products that cost you a lot of money. They may overlap, but there's going to be unique items on each one of those lists. So make sure that you're looking at your top 5 to 8 products that you're buying that are high volume or high dollar. Okay. You should know, like you know your birthday, or you know your phone number. You should know what you're paying for your to-go cups. You should know what you're paying for your alt milks. You should know what you're paying for your dairy. You should obviously know what you're paying for your green if you're a roaster, and if you're a multi-roaster and you don't roast but you're a cafe, you should know obviously what you're paying for your coffee that you're buying. And you should know that every week. You got to keep tabs on that, because you can see trends happening early, and then you can start to ask questions. Number 2, customer business reviews. You talk with your vendors about anticipated incoming pricing changes. Remember, they're buying products from somebody else as well, right? So they're going to know when things are going up. You need to let them know that they know things are going up or pricing is going to change. So just ask them these questions. Like, for example, in 2021, I knew that my to-go cups are going to double in pricing. You remember when we had all those supply chain issues? But I knew that because I was doing customer business reviews with my paper supplier, and I knew 3 months ahead of time that those prices were going up, so I could do something about it. Here's what I could do. It's likely that your vendors price off their most recent purchase order, who they're purchasing from, right? If the price goes up, whatever stock they have in stock is probably going to be priced off that new PO. So one thing to do to keep track of this is understanding how much of your stock, if you have, logoed cups, whatever it is that you own in their inventory, or that you use a lot of, know when they're going to be bringing in new stock, so that you can maybe bump up your order and buy the current inventory in their warehouse at the current price before it goes up. Like, I had 15 cases of cups left in the warehouse before they took a new PO. I took all 15 cases at the old price before that new PO hit, so that the new stock coming in was the only stock priced at that higher price. Does it make sense? No problem. We'll talk about it later. And then in that same vein, trade exclusive vendor relationships or prime vendor relationships for incentives from your vendors, and audit rights for key products. You should be able to sit down with them and say, I buy a lot of this from you. I want to know what my markup is, and I'd love to see the PO that you purchased this off of. It's just trust but verify, right? And it shows them that you're paying attention to your costs. And incentives. So if you don't have incentives right now, you can ask your vendors about, hey, I get 2 deliveries from you a week. If I went down to 1, could I get what would you pay me for that? They're going to save money, and they should share that with you. If I grow my business by X%, could I get a part of that savings or that additional growth that you're realizing from my purchasing? If I pay early, if I have 30-day terms and I pay in under 14, can I get a piece of that back? All these things help make your vendors more profitable. And with a good relationship with your vendors, you could certainly share in that profitability. Okay, that was a quick tangent, but I think they're important things to kind of keep in mind, and stay tuned for more information on how we can have a better, more deep conversation later on. Okay, now we have the terms. We know markup versus margin. Couple of things about COGS, and so now we want to think a little bit more about how do we dig in and actually make informed changes to our menu. So here's where the rubber meets the road. Let me pull up something for you. I am going to share. Oops, sorry. I'm going to share the tool that I had put together, the cafe pricing template. Okay. So again, this is something that I used before in restaurants. I adapted it for cafes, and it was super helpful. It really, I think, made a big difference. So as you're looking to figure out where you're going to price your menu, you should know how you are perceived in your market with cafes, other specialty coffee folks in your market, and how you're positioned, how you're perceived, and where your pricing's at. So I would have my team on a quarterly basis just pick 5, 8. I think I have 13 here. That's too many. But common drinks, lattes, caps, cold brew, drip, tea, matcha, chai, these drinks at comparable specialty coffee people in my market. And by the by, this is from Spy House, but this is 2 years old, and this is not privileged information. It's the price of our drinks. You can go online and figure all this stuff out anyway, and it's old. But I'd want to know that. I'd want to know, like, okay, in the Minneapolis St. Paul market, wanted to make sure Spy House was positioned as a premium brand. And so I knew that my pricing was usually about 10 to 15% higher than everybody else's, but I was okay with that. But I needed to make sure that that's where I was at, right? And so I'd go and collect, from Dogwood or Five Water or Wesley Andrews. I'd go and see, what are they charging for the same drinks, and how is that in relation to me? Like, and then I'd find 3 or so that are close in proximity or close in concept to who we were. And I'd say, well, what's my over under on how I look against those comps? So on lattes, I was 31% higher than Dogwood, 10% than 5 Watt, and 4% than higher than Fragment. But on average, I was at about 15% higher. So I'm okay with that. I think we're in a pretty good spot. And I do that for all the rest of the drinks as well. It's a good touch point. It will not answer all the questions, but it's a good touch point so that you understand how you're perceived in the market, okay? And where your pricing's at, so that you don't end up pricing yourself out of the market because you don't understand your positioning in the market, okay? Cool. So that's something, keep track of that on a quarterly basis, and then you can start to chart that too, and you can see, hey, when's the last time anybody else raised their pricing? Because let me tell you, there is lots of reasons why Pennies and Misfit closed, but I can go back through my data and see, they didn't change their pricing for the past year and a half or for the past 2 years. It's a big deal. It's not going to be the be all and end all, but given the price increases we saw in everything from green to disposables and just supply chain challenges over the past 2 years, you have to track. You have to keep track of it, and you have to make adjustments accordingly. It's impactful. Okay. That's that piece. Let's dive right into the price data piece, which I know if you're not a spreadsheet person, this is overwhelming. Okay, this is a lot of data. We do have a summary tab that I'll get to in a second, but this is the tool that I put together. And this is basically an export from a POS system. We use Square, but if you use Square or Clover or Toast, any POS system right now, you're going to be able to export, a velocity report or something that's going to tell you by item how much you sold. And then I built on top of that the additional information that tells me more about each one of these products. So item name, this is all from the system, right? The size of the item, the variation. This is by the by. This is based on some things that I've done in the past in market with cafes, but this is all made up numbers. Just so we're aware that I'm not sharing anything that's privileged information. This is fiction, but it proves the point. The category, most POSs will categorize your products. The cost of goods, you're going to have to put your cost of goods in. There's going to have to be some heavy lifting, right? And that on the front side, you should know your cost of goods for all your products that you're selling. If you don't, we can help with that, but you should be able to know how much you're paying for all the stuff that's going into your products. Okay. Current price, that's the price on the menu. This is my projected new price. Let's start with the strip coffee up here. So I was at $3.25 and I'm thinking $3.50. The increase is 25 cents. Now comes the fun part. Okay, it's a 7% increase. All right, feels good about that. My margin on that is 88%. That's terrific, right? My markup 742%, which is what it should be. Again, this is not an expensive item. And you have to sell a lot of them. So that's, I know that my drip coffee always needs to be above 80%. Okay. From a margin standpoint. And whatever my markup needs to be in order to get to that margin, that's what I'm going to do. Okay. The contribution for my coffee is $3.09. It's healthy. It's healthy. Okay. TTM, items sold, trailing 12 months. So whenever I want to figure out the impact of the pricing that I'm going to do, I want to know, okay, what did I sell for the past 12 months? In my hypothetical forecast situation, I'm going to sell exactly the same. This is not about driving new business. This is not about getting new feet in the door. It's not about, necessarily about promotional pieces. This is like, if I did the same thing last year, what would be the effect? So the gross sales would be, basically the velocity times the old price, which is 325, and that brought in $133,000. If I do that with the new price, I'll bring in $144,000. So basically, by changing the price, I know that I'm going to get another 10 grand, and that price is up by 10 cents. So you can see, oh, I'm sorry, 25 cents. I was on the wrong drip. But is impactful for my 10 ounce as well. Just on drip coffee, by raising one 10 cents and raising one 25 cents, I'm going to bring in $14,000. Okay. And again, you can see, we could even add another column. This is flexible. I could say, what's my contribution? Okay. So my contribution would be my revenue increase. I'm not going to see all that. Whoops. Sorry. Yeah, I do that all the time. I'm not going to see that real quick. Okay. Equals that my revenue times my margin, 88%. So of that 10,000, I'm going to see $9,000 of that. And then we can take that formula and we can copy it. Whoops. We can copy it down and we can do it for everything here, right? We can see how much I'm actually going to make versus how much I'm actually going to bring in. What's my margin? What's my contribution? Okay. So the way that I use this is rather than just saying, I'm going to raise all my pricing 5%, right? And I brought in, $3 million last year. So that 5%, I'm get $150,000. Well, yeah, not really. Because it doesn't, not every price needs to be adjusted, and some prices should be adjusted a little bit more. Some prices should probably be left alone. Again, if I go back and I start, if I start pulling up different categories, let me take a look at, let's say, just all my coffee and tea. Okay. All right, let's look at that as a category. I'm looking at on average, not weighted, on average, I'm raising pricing almost 4%, 3.8% on that. Well, what's super interesting here is look at my margin on what is this? My growlers for the staff, the cost of goods is $5.73, but I'm only charging $5. It's very generous, but maybe I should just so I can cover my costs, I'll raise that $1. Okay, so now I'm not losing money on that one. See, this tool helps you dig in and figure out where are my little bits and pieces that are making a big difference here. And then, I could take a look at these and say, am I comfortable with these price increase? Let's take a look at something that seems to have a little bit of a lower, oh, look at that. My markup on cold brew is only 86%. I get a decent contribution from that. A little bit lower margin. So, okay, I was at $4.95. I went to $5.20. Let me check my market comps. Where am I at in cold brew? Well, on average, against some real close competitors, I'm 23% higher. Okay, do I really want to push that up a little bit? I'm not really sure if I do. I not, if everybody else is charging 4.5, and there's a nitro, that's a Starbucks, so that's a different deal. If I didn't have my market comps, I might say I should bump that up. I should really go to maybe 5.75. But if I look at how that's showing up in market, I'm like, maybe not super comfortable with that. And I sell a lot of it. So I'm going, it's more of I sell a good amount of cold brew. I'll take that 25 cents because at the end of the day, that's going to bring in another 9 grand or in my pocket, $4,000. Okay. So this is, again, not going to answer all the questions. It's going to help you start to focus on the right questions. How are these pricing changes going to impact my bottom line? And what can I do by category? What can I do by, if I bring all the categories back, for example, where did I sort this? Okay, on categories. If I bring all the categories back and I say, okay, I want to look at just, now right now I have it sorted on what I sell the most of. Drip coffee, cold brew, latte, a signature drink, some more lattes. I mean, no surprises there, but maybe I want to look at what brings me the greatest contribution. Let's do that. Okay, greatest contribution. Well, if I sell a lot of brats encores, I'm going to do great because I'm making $68, but I sold one. So, it helps you understand where do I have but look at all this merchandise that I have that has got decent contribution. So one idea with that is, okay, I raised the pricing on that. I think I'm in good shape, but I really think that I can use those merch pieces because I've got the margin to do so to offer a deal on those and say, buy a t-shirt or buy 2 bags of coffee, 2 bags of whole bean coffee, get a t-shirt for 20% off or 25% off. Gives you an idea where you have some room to work with marketing on how you're going to give and take a little bit. And the last part of this pricing tool is just a summary. This is what's called a pivot table. This looks at the categories through the lens of each one of those KPIs I talked about: average margin, average markup, and the average contribution. The last piece I wanted to talk about as we get close to some Q&A here is, look, on average if I sold one of everything, I would have 5.57% price increase across this menu. However, I sell more of some things than others. I mean, I sell one Brazza Encore, I sell 14,000 cups of 10-ounce cups of coffee, right? So depending upon how I'm moving that price, what my new margin is, and what my contribution is, my weighted average, what I can actually expect is going to be a little bit higher, 5.87. Let's say I wanted to get to 6. My goal was to get to a 6% weighted average increase. Go back to my price data, start sorting again by what do I sell a lot of, or what do I have that gives me a high contribution, and do I have room? Like, should I go in and raise the price on my Chemex brewer? Maybe. I don't sell a lot of them though, so kind of got to be careful about that. Are there some coffees that we did before that we could bring back and increase the price slightly? Possibly. So you can dig in and figure out how you can reach that goal. The cool thing is when this is all done and you've made your price, like everything's fine, you update your menus, now you can keep this tool. You can go back, you can erase this column, right? The velocity, and every month you can export from your POS system and import. You don't have to do it manually. There's a way to do it to connect it with a formula where you can see, okay, for this month, how much did I sell of everything? And am I on track? Because everything else will calculate. Am I on track to hit that 6%? You can look at each month historically, these trailing 12 months, of the total amount that I made, what percentage was made in each month? We know that, you were coming out of a slower season, spring goes up, summer goes up, there's a little spike maybe, depending upon where you're located in fall, and things start to fall back off again. So are you tracking? Are you going to make 4% of that 6% in January? Are you going to make 7% of that 6% in February? You can look at this on a month-by-month basis, not only predict how you should raise prices and where you should raise prices, but is it working? Just get the data back in there from your POS. Okay, and then just go back to your summary sheet and see, am I on track or am I off track? My menu increases for this one right now, last statement, are going to contribute $92,000 to the bottom line. And depending upon what my weighted average margin is going to be, I can also predict how much of that I'm going to actually get in my pocket as well. Okay, so to be clear, as I go back here, market comps, talked a little bit about the pricing analysis tool. Here's my summary. Knowing all this won't answer all your questions. It'll help you ask the right questions, right? It'll help you dig in so that the decisions you make are informed, data-driven decisions, not just, I think I sell a lot of lattes. I should probably increase the price, but I'm nervous. Am I going to price myself out of the category? Is that a good idea? Hopefully what I've shared today is going to show you how to analyze this and really do a gut check for your gut check and back it up with data. All right. A little bit over, but I will pause so that we can talk about any questions you have, and I'm happy to answer what I can.
Thank you, Kevin. That was amazing. I feel like everything you shared was so useful. And please, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I have a question actually that came up, and I know that this is sort of maybe not exactly what you're talking about, but I feel like it's a real thing that happens for roaster retailers or just retailers, is that so it can be really enchanting to want to sell something like a Mocha Master or like a really high priced item when you can, get it for wholesale and you see how like the contribution that selling one of those is going to make.
Mhm.
But I also have seen a lot of those collect a lot of dust in your
Yeah.
inventory. So,
Yeah.
how do you go about making choices about these kinds of things um, when you're really thinking about product mix in your menu?
Yeah, great question. So equipment's always tough. We all have to acknowledge that we will never, nobody will ever be a price leader on equipment because Amazon exists. So everybody knows they can go to Amazon, and look, people want to support local. We've got such a robust and engaged community in specialty coffee across the world. So people will turn for solutions if it makes sense. So I do more of on equipment. I realize a lot of that is more of a convenience for my D2C shopper, right? So if somebody's buying my beans online, and I can package them together, maybe I put a kit together, right? I'm like a home brewing kit. It's a great around the holidays. Maybe it's a great Mother's Day gift, Father's Day gift. I don't know, but packaging them together so that basically you can collectively say, well, this makes a lot of sense, and you solve somebody's gift giving issue quickly. That's actually a pretty major area that I looked at equipment, because I'm never going to buy, I'm never going to buy Encores by the pallet. I'm going to buy 2, right, or 3. So I'm not going to get great pricing on it. I think you need to have them available because customers are looking at specialty coffee for what's the coolest, what's the best. There's a lot of options out there. And so if you can provide that information, there's lots of different ways to market it too. Like I said, a bundle for a gift pack is a good idea where you can bring the price of everything down because the overall contribution from that package is going to be pretty great. You can use it in training videos that you share with the public about like, hey, we've got this great Gesha and I know you're paying a lot for it, but tell you what, here is what you need to have to pair with it so that you're getting an amazing experience with this. Or if you're doing it on the road, here's your AeroPress and here's how that works, right? So I think you got to be judicious about how much you buy and realize that yes, your point's well taken, Miranda. Your net, the margins and the contribution from that are super attractive, but that's not you're not an equipment dealer, and you're not going to sell a ton of them, but you should have them to help kind of enhance your overall messaging about how you want your coffee to show up for your consumer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Here's a question. Thinking about the recent sensitivity to price increases and or shrinkflation, when you calculate the total contribution of new or proposed price changes, do you factor any kind of drawdown for customers lost due to the price increase? How are you factoring in lost customers?
Yeah. Yeah. So if your traffic is down, um, I take it into consideration, but I still there still has to be, I think the mechanics are the same. So how are you positioned in your market? What's your margins? What are your markups to get to those margins? What's your contribution? And if you are trending down in traffic, whether that's online traffic or in cafe traffic, I think you have to be very careful about trying to compensate with a price increase. Okay. I think you have to know what you have to know. Am I here on traffic? Am I here? Am I here? Or am I here? Okay. So it's another factor that goes into like, okay, when I was talking about that cold brew, I'm like, I don't know, maybe I could go 30 cents instead of 25 cents. And, but if I know traffic is up, I might keep it at 25 because I don't want to push that envelope right now. So know where you're at. But don't compensate for that because that's a different conversation. As you're running your business, you have to talk about then we're trending down and we need to dig in and try to figure out why. Is it a pricing thing? Have I priced myself to a point where, I think I'm premium and should be 10% above everybody else, but I'm not offering that experience? Is it a training thing? Is it a customer service piece? My hours, are they wrong? I did a whole mess of calculations on profitability by the hour for all the cafes, and that helped me set it showed that on 4 of the 5 cafes, I was losing money. We were open late and I was losing money the last 3 hours, losing money. not breaking even. So there's lots of, I think, other things that need to go into that conversation. But my advice is not to solve it by increasing your price, because that's just, you will get to a point where you're not going to make up that difference in increasing prices. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. How often should you implement increases? Because customers are very reluctant to have their favorite beverage increase by $1.
Yes. Okay. I think you should do at least an annual increase somewhere. Doesn't have to be everywhere. Using this tool, you should be able to dig in and figure out where's this going to be most impactful. Where have my COGS increased the most beyond my control, so that I have to share the burden of that price increase with my customers. Okay, so start with that, and you're going to find, I don't ever remember in my lifetime that, we've had steady deflation. Like, oh, pricing went down this year on everything. Isn't that great? So prices are always going to go up. It's always going to be 3 to 4%, right? So you need to keep up with that, but do it in a very calculated way. I did in 2021, no, 2022. I did two price increases. I did one in, I believe, February, and I did one in June. Because pricing, supply chain had not yet corrected, and that's when, shipping containers were really expensive, and that's when my cups went up in pricing. And so I had to take that second price increase. But I'm really intrigued by Felix's $1. If you're doing this correctly, your pricing is not going to increase by $1. Okay, that's a lot. That would be a 25% price increase. Maybe anywhere from if you're doing 15 to 30% price increases on your drinks, you miss something. You missed something, right? You missed an opportunity to increase pricing. I had to do it on my wholesale coffee bags because for some reason those got ignored for a long time. And I'm like, holy moly, we have no margin on these left. And I had to do massive increases on 5-pound bags. And that was painful. I lost a couple of customers. That's why it's important that you do this on a regular basis. Which season? Spring? I would do it. I mean, I would do it nowish. I would think February is a good time to do it. Post-holiday, the first part of Q1 is a good time to do it. And then I would say, if you have to do 2, then aim for the end of summer. Like back to school is when everybody gets a little bit of a dip. So I would say that's not the worst time. But if you're keeping up with your cost of goods and having those conversations with your vendors, you're going to see some of this coming down the pipe and be like, I use, everybody's got a different way to do this, and people are way better at looking at green than I am, but I use an app called Commodity that'll just give me, I can look at by the hour back 10 years about where green pricing's at. And so then I can talk to people about, like, is this going to bite me? And when's it going to bite me? I need to know so that I can get ahead of it a little bit. So, yeah, price sensitivity is a big deal. I get that. And sometimes what maybe instead of a price change, maybe it's time for a menu change, right? So can you introduce some new products that don't have a comp before, and you introduce them at a new price level so that, I've got a new trademark, or we call them trademark drinks, but a new specialty latte that's going to be standard on the menu, and it's a big rollout, and it's at a new price point. That's a good way to test the market. Or some of the other seasonal ones, the LTOs that we all do, like, what do we have? One called Cherry Styles. It was popular, I think, probably because of the name, but it was like this, kind of like a cherry latte thing that was fun. But it was popular, but I could see, I would consider, maybe not with that name, but that product maybe could go on the menu, because we tested it before, did really well, put it on the menu. There's different strategies you can take. So I guess let me summarize. Felix, if you're raising your prices by $1, you missed the opportunity to raise pricing before. And then we have to think strategically about how to get that $1. Felix says, is a little pastry a good way to use to implement a new drink? Is little pastry like adding a pastry? Is that what we're talking about? Like adding a pastry to adding pastry as a category, or adding pastry to like, hey, this is a drink combo. I get this little cute croissant and whatever. So what would, I guess
I'm assuming he means like, do you want to add a little pastry to your drink as like a freebie?
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't, not as a freebie. I think upselling, staff training, customer service about how you make sure that your staff are suggesting pastries or just saying, I love this pastry, or have you tried this pastry? I love it. That sort of thing is helpful to get your guest check average up, which is another metric. But I wouldn't, I hesitate unless you're baking in-house, which is a whole another mess. If you're getting third-party pastry brought in, your margin's probably usually about 50% on that, 50 to up to 100% markup. I would be careful about that because you can lose money on that real quick.
We'll have to have a more of a series for you because you could talk about all of this, I feel like, going forward. We are at time. We're a little bit over. Gloria, I see you want Kevin's tool. Go ahead and email us directly if you want the tool. It's only free for those of you that joined this call and that email us directly for it. And then we will be putting it on our website, hopefully with a little tutorial from Kevin, and that will be for charge. So grab it while it's hot. And I also wanted to say, if you have additional questions for Kevin, that's his email address. Look, he put his cell phone in there that he wants to hear from you guys. And then I also wanted to tell you guys, we have a Coffee MBA podcast. Please listen to it on Apple, YouTube, or Spotify. Rate, view, and subscribe. And also, if you loved Kevin's webinar, he's going to do a series of webinars. And so we're going to be lucky enough to see his face again and hear his mad cafe skills coming at us in the future. And so please continue to watch your LinkedIn and our other social media channels for how you can see Kevin drop his knowledge on you again. So thank you for coming. We love hearing from you. Don't forget to fill out the survey, and we hope to see you at the next one. Oh,
Thanks.
one more thing. Kevin will be teaching workshops at SCA. If there are still spots and you are going to SCA, grab a spot with Kevin. He'll be teaching about distribution, demystifying distribution relationships, and he will be talking about building a winning strategy for your coffee business. So as you can see, those are going to be very valuable. That's it. Have a great day. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
everyone.
Bye.